The afternoon sun hung lazily in the sky, casting golden streaks of light across the bustling riverside market. Merchants shouted from their stalls, displaying baskets of ripe fruits, colorful fabrics, and the scent of freshly baked bread that drifted through the air. Children ran between the crowd with laughter, while women bargained for spices and jewelry. Amidst the noise and life of the market, a group of wealthy young women made their way through, their bright silken dresses swishing as they walked. At the center of attention was Alina. She was the daughter of a wealthy merchant, and her beauty was matched only by her pride. Her gown shimmered like the surface of water, embroidered with silver thread, and she carried herself with the arrogance of someone who believed the world belonged to her. The crowd parted naturally, not because of respect but because of fear of her sharp tongue and cruel laughter. Her friends trailed behind her, admiring her boldness, eager to be part of her world of luxury. As Alina strolled along the riverbank, enjoying the admiring glances of strangers, an old beggar slowly approached her. His clothes were torn and patched, his hair long and unkempt, and his body bent from years of hardship. His eyes, however, were gentle, though clouded with sorrow. In his trembling hands he clutched a few worn-out coins, perhaps all he had earned that day after hours of begging under the sun. He lifted his gaze to Alina, his voice hoarse yet respectful. "Kind young lady," he said softly, bowing his head, "would you spare a little kindness for an old man? A piece of bread, or perhaps a coin for food? I have not eaten today." For a brief moment, the market seemed to fall quiet around them. Some passers-by slowed, curious to see how the wealthy girl would respond. Her friends leaned closer, waiting for her reaction. Alina paused, her lips curling into a smirk. Instead of reaching into her purse, she tilted her head and studied the beggar with cold amusement. "Look at you," she said mockingly, her voice carrying a sharp edge. "You expect me to give you money? Tell me, old man, what will you do with it? Waste it on stale bread that won't even fill your stomach." Her friends giggled, covering their mouths. The beggar's wrinkled face flushed with shame, but he held out his coins anyway, hoping she might show some mercy. Alina's eyes gleamed mischievously. With a sudden movement, she reached out and snatched the small handful of coins from his hand. The old man gasped, his frail fingers grasping at the air as though trying to take them back. But Alina only laughed, holding the coins high where he could not reach. "Do you really think these are worth anything?" she sneered. Then, without hesitation, she turned toward the flowing river beside the market. With a dramatic flourish, she flung the coins into the water. The silver circles glinted in the sunlight for a moment before sinking out of sight beneath the rippling surface. Her friends burst into laughter, clapping their hands as if she had performed a clever trick. "Oh, Alina, you're too much," one of them exclaimed. "Did you see his face?" Another giggled. "He thought you'd help him." But the beggar stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief. His coins, his only earnings, his only hope for a piece of bread that night were gone. His lips trembled as he whispered, Why would you do such a thing?" Alina tossed her hair over her shoulder, her smile cruel and unbothered. "Because you amuse me. Now go back to your corner and beg someone else. Perhaps you'll find another fool to pity you." Tears welled in the old man's eyes as he sank to his knees, staring at the water where his coins had vanished. The crowd that had gathered watched in silence, some in pity for him, others in fear of Alina's scorn. But no one dared to intervene. Slowly, the beggar lifted his face toward her, and though his voice was weak, it carried a weight that silenced even her friends' laughter. "Child," he said, his tone filled with sorrow rather than anger. "You may laugh now, but remember this. Wealth does not last forever. Pride blinds the heart, and cruelty leaves scars that even riches cannot heal. You have taken from me the little I had, but one day you will know the pain of emptiness. And when that day comes, no coin, no jewel, and no family will save you." The words fell heavy, like a curse whispered into the wind. Alina felt a chill crawl down her spine, but she shook it off quickly, forcing another laugh. "Save your words, old man. Your curses mean nothing to me." Her friends, though still laughing, exchanged uneasy glances. The beggar's trembling form and solemn words unsettled them in ways they could not explain. But Alina waved them on, and together they walked away, leaving the old man behind by the riverside. Yet as Alina's laughter faded into the busy market, the beggar remained on his knees, eyes lifted toward the heavens, whispering a prayer for justice, not from hatred, but from the deep wound of humiliation. And though no one realized it then, his words had already begun to shape Alina's destiny. That evening, after her cruel encounter at the riverside, Alina returned home with the same haughty smile she always wore. Her family's grand mansion stood tall on the edge of the city, its walls painted white, its windows shining like mirrors in the sun. Servants opened the gates the moment her carriage approached, bowing low as she stepped out. To the world, the house of Alina's father, Merchant Rahman, was a symbol of wealth, power, and stability. Inside, the dining hall glittered with golden chandeliers. Platters of steaming food were laid on the long oak table, roasted meat, fresh bread, fruits, and sweets of every kind. Alina took her place, certain that she belonged at the very center of such abundance. Her parents spoke of business and trade, of ships arriving at the port and jewels brought from foreign lands. Her brothers boasted of their horses, and her mother admired Alina's beauty and elegance. Yet as she lifted a silver goblet to her lips, she suddenly remembered the beggar's voice at the river. "One day, you will know the pain of emptiness." For the first time, the words unsettled her. She quickly shook the thought from her mind and laughed at one of her brother's jokes. To her, curses were nothing but superstitions whispered by the poor. But that night, the winds of fate began to shift. By the next morning, whispers spread through the city. One of Rahman's trading ships had sunk during a violent storm at sea. Cargo worth a fortune, silks, spices, and gems, was swallowed by the ocean. Alina overheard her father speaking in hushed tones to her mother. "It is only one ship," he reassured, though worry shadowed his face. "We still have many more. It will not ruin us." Alina shrugged off the incident. Surely, her father's empire was too large to fall because of one loss. She spent the day shopping with friends, buying fine fabrics and perfumes without a care. But within a week, another disaster struck. A caravan transporting gold and goods from distant lands was attacked by bandits. News came that nothing had survived. Not the guards, not the camels, not the precious cargo. Merchant Rahman's face grew pale as ashes when the report reached him. "Twice in 1 month," he muttered to himself, pacing in his study. "Such ill fortune has never happened to me before." Alina tried to comfort him, but her words rang hollow. Deep inside, the memory of the beggar's curse whispered louder. Wealth does not last forever. Within months, the family's downfall accelerated. Investors pulled out of Rahman's business, fearing he was cursed. Debt collectors came knocking at their doors. The once loyal servants left quietly, one by one, seeking work in wealthier households. Rumors spread through the city that Rahman's fortune was slipping through his fingers like sand. The grand mansion that had once shone so brightly now grew silent and cold. Chandeliers were sold, furniture auctioned, and expensive fabrics stripped from the walls. Alina could hardly believe her eyes as she watched strangers carry away pieces of her luxurious life. She begged her father to fight harder, to reclaim what was theirs. But Rahman was exhausted. His face aged years in mere months, and his voice lost its authority. "My child," he said one evening, his hands trembling, "I built this empire for you, for your brothers, for our family. But the hand of fate is stronger than mine. I can do nothing now." The breaking point came when creditors demanded the last of their possessions. With no money left to pay, the family faced disgrace. In anger and frustration, Alina's brothers turned on her. "This is your fault," one shouted. "Ever since you mocked that beggar, misfortune has followed us," another accused. Alina's eyes widened in shock. "What? You cannot possibly believe that an old man's words caused all this." But her mother's silence was louder than words. She avoided Alina's eyes, as though deep down she, too, believed the curse had been real. One night, when the family decided to leave the city in search of a humbler life elsewhere, they made a cruel decision. They refused to take Alina with them. "We cannot carry the shadow of your pride with us," her father said sternly. "You mocked the poor and brought shame upon our name. You will remain here and face the consequences of your actions." Alina fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Please, father. Please, mother. Don't leave me alone." But her cries were ignored. The family departed under the cover of night, leaving her in the empty mansion that would soon be claimed by creditors. By morning, she stood alone outside the gates, with no wealth, no family, and nowhere to go. For the first time in her life, Alina knew hunger. The market, where once she walked proudly, now became the place where she wandered in shame, begging for scraps. The same merchants who once bowed before her now turned away. Children laughed at her ragged clothes. Her former friends, the ones who had once giggled at her cruelty, avoided her like a disease. One evening, as she sat by the same riverside where she had once mocked the beggar, she whispered through her tears, "Is this what you meant? Is this the emptiness you spoke of?" The river gave her no answer, but the silence was heavy, as though the world itself had turned its back on her. And deep inside, Alina began to realize that the beggar's curse had not only taken her wealth, it had stripped her of pride, forcing her to taste the very bitterness she had once mocked. Nights grew colder for Alina. The marble floors and golden chandeliers of her mansion were now nothing more than a memory. She slept wherever she could, sometimes under the shade of a broken wall, sometimes on the damp earth near the riverside where her arrogance had once shone brightest. Hunger gnawed at her stomach like a merciless beast, and every day became a fight for survival. At first, she refused to beg. Her pride, though battered, still clung to her. She would sit quietly, waiting for someone to recognize her, perhaps an old family friend who might take pity and offer her shelter. But the days passed, and no one came. People who once flattered her avoided her eyes, pretending not to see her. Some whispered behind her back. Others pointed and laughed, enjoying the irony of the once proud girl who now looked like a beggar herself. One afternoon, weak from hunger, Alina finally lowered herself to the level she had once mocked. She extended her trembling hands at the marketplace, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, just a piece of bread. I have not eaten." A woman selling vegetables glanced at her, then sneered. "Bread? Why don't you ask your rich father for it?" "Oh, that's right, he's gone. Just like your riches." She turned away, her laughter harsh. A group of children, seeing Alina's desperation, threw pebbles at her. "Look at the princess," they jeered. "The princess of rags. Beg for us, princess. Dance for us, like you made that old man suffer." The humiliation burned more deeply than hunger. Alina covered her face and wept, realizing she had become the very thing she once mocked. The nights were crueler still. When the wind howled through the city, she curled into herself, shivering in her thin, torn clothes. Her body ached from sleeping on stone, her once soft hands now rough and blistered from digging through rubbish heaps for scraps of food. She learned the taste of stale bread, the bitterness of spoiled fruit, and the shame of drinking water from broken jars left on the roadside. But worse than all of this was the silence of her heart. For years she had lived in noise, laughter, music, praise, and wealth. Now, in the silence of her suffering, she was forced to hear the voice she had tried to ignore, the beggar's words. "Wealth does not last forever. Pride blinds the heart. One day, you will know the pain of emptiness." Each word echoed inside her, tormenting her like a drumbeat she could not silence. And slowly, painfully, Alina began to understand. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of fire and gold, Alina sat by the riverside. Her reflection stared back at her in the water, unrecognizable. Her hair, once brushed with care, hung tangled and dull. Her clothes, once embroidered with jewels, were torn rags clinging to her thin frame. Her face, once admired by many, was pale and hollow. She remembered the day she had stood in this very place, tossing the beggar's coins into the river, laughing as he wept. Now she watched the water ripple, as if mocking her with memories she wished she could erase. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered into the evening air, "I stole from you, not just your coins. I stole your dignity. I stole your hope." Her voice cracked as sobs overcame her. For the first time, she no longer cursed her fate or blamed her family for abandoning her. She blamed herself, her cruelty, her pride, her arrogance. They had all led her here. Days turned into weeks. The market people no longer even mocked her. They ignored her completely, as though she were invisible. It was a different kind of pain, this invisibility, to exist and yet not be seen. But in her suffering, Alina noticed something she had never cared to see before. She saw the beggars who lined the streets, shivering in cold and hunger. She saw the weary eyes of mothers carrying crying children. She saw the elderly sharing their last crumbs with one another. And in their eyes, she saw not weakness, as she once thought, but a quiet strength. They endured humiliation every day and still survived. It was then that Alina began to change. Instead of fighting to preserve her pride, she began to share in the small ways she could. If she found a scrap of bread, she would break it in half and give it to another beggar beside her. If she had nothing to give, she would offer a kind word, a smile, or simply sit with them so they would not be alone in their suffering. The other beggars, surprised by her kindness, began to accept her among them. They did not know her as the wealthy merchant's daughter who once mocked them. They knew her only as Alina, the girl who now lived as one of them. One night, as she lay under the open sky with two other beggars by her side, she whispered, "I used to think riches made me powerful, but now I see it is kindness that gives strength. I was blind, truly blind." In the silence that followed, Alina felt something shift inside her heart. The arrogance that had once ruled her was gone, replaced by humility. She had lost her home, her family, and her wealth, but in her suffering, she had found something she never knew she lacked: compassion. For the first time, she understood the beggar's lesson. Poverty was not just about hunger. It was about dignity, about being seen as human. And she, in her cruelty, had taken that dignity away. Now, stripped of everything, she was beginning to learn what it meant to be truly human. The morning sun rose gently over the riverside, casting ripples of gold across the flowing water. Alina sat on a stone near the riverbank, her body weak and frail, her heart heavy with guilt. She had endured weeks of hunger, humiliation, and loneliness. Each day had stripped her of pride, but also each day had opened her eyes wider to truths she had once ignored. That morning felt different. The air was calm, as though the world itself was waiting. Deep within her heart, a voice whispered, "Go back, find him, ask for forgiveness." Alina's hands trembled as she pushed herself to her feet. She knew where to go. The image of the old beggar's sorrowful face was etched into her memory. She remembered his spot near the bridge by the riverside, the very place she had mocked him. Perhaps he was still there. Perhaps he was gone. But if there was even a chance, she had to try. Her steps were slow and unsteady as she walked through the familiar market. The merchants called out their prices, children ran between the stalls, and life went on as usual. But for Alina, every sound seemed distant, drowned out by the pounding of her heart. What if he refused to forgive her? What if he spat on her as she deserved? Finally, she reached the bridge. There, sitting cross-legged on the dusty ground, was the beggar. His clothes were still worn and patched, his body still frail, but his face carried a strange calmness. He was speaking softly to a child who had given him a piece of bread, blessing the boy with gentle words. Alina froze, her throat tightened. The sight of him, so humble and so human, broke something inside her. Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. With trembling knees, she walked closer. The beggar noticed her but did not speak. His gaze rested on her face. Hollow now, stripped of pride and beauty, but marked with deep sorrow. Alina fell to her knees before him, her hands pressed together in desperation. Her voice shook as she spoke. "Old man, do you remember me?" The beggar's eyes narrowed slightly. "How could I forget?" His voice was calm, yet there was no malice in it. "I wronged you," Alina whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I mocked your pain. I took the little you had and threw it away. I humiliated you before everyone. And for what? For my pride. For laughter. I was blind, cruel, and foolish." She bowed her head until it touched the ground. "Please, forgive me." Silence stretched between them. The market's noise seemed to fade, and all Alina could hear was the beating of her heart. At last the beggar spoke. His voice was soft, yet each word carried weight. "Child, do you know why your life changed after that day?" Alina lifted her tear-streaked face, shaking her head. "It was not my curse that ruined you," he said gently. "It was your pride. Pride blinds the eyes, hardens the heart, and leads to downfall. When you threw my coins into the river, you did not just take money, you drowned your own compassion. And when compassion dies, life itself becomes empty." Alina's lips quivered. Then is there any way I can undo what I did?" The beggar studied her for a long moment. Then, with trembling hands, he reached out and placed his weathered palm on her head. "You have already begun," he said. "You have known hunger, you have known humiliation, and now you know humility. The heart that once laughed at pain now weeps for it. That is enough. I forgive you." Alina gasped as though a great weight had been lifted from her chest. Tears poured down her face, but this time they were not only of sorrow, they were of relief. She pressed her forehead to his hand, clutching it as though it were her only anchor in the world. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you for showing me what true wealth is." The beggar smiled faintly. "True wealth is not gold, nor jewels, nor houses of stone. True wealth is kindness, compassion, and humility. With these, even the poorest man is rich. Without them, even the richest man is poor." That day marked the beginning of Alina's transformation. She no longer felt cursed. Instead, she felt free, as though the chains of pride and arrogance that had bound her heart were shattered. The forgiveness she received was not just a gift from the beggar. It was a light that pierced through the darkness she had carried inside. As she stood up, the beggar looked at her once more. "Do not waste this chance, child. Use your new heart to bring comfort where once you brought pain. That is how you will truly be forgiven." Alina bowed deeply. "I will," she promised. And for the first time in her life, she meant every word. The forgiveness Alina received from the beggar was like water poured onto parched earth. It soaked into her soul, softening what had once been hard and barren. That moment by the riverside marked the death of the arrogant girl she once was and the birth of a new Alina, one who understood the meaning of compassion. But forgiveness alone could not feed her empty stomach, nor shelter her from the cold. She still had no home, no wealth, and no family. Yet now, instead of despair, she felt determination. For the first time in her life, she wanted to build something not out of pride, but out of love. Finding work. The very next morning, Alina wandered the streets in search of work. Her hands, once adorned with jewels, were blistered and rough, but she did not care. Passing by a small bakery at the corner of the market, she caught the warm scent of bread drifting through the air. The baker, a stout man with flour dusted across his apron, was arranging loaves on the counter. Timidly, Alina approached him. "Sir," she said softly, "I have no home, no family, and no food, but I have 2 hands and a willing heart. Please, let me work for you. I will sweep floors, wash dishes, or carry flour. Anything." The baker studied her for a moment. He recognized her faintly. This was once the proud daughter of merchant Ramon, the girl who mocked the poor. Yet what he saw now was not pride but humility. After a pause, he nodded. "Very well. You may start by cleaning. If you work hard, you'll earn your share of bread." Alina bowed gratefully, tears threatening her eyes. It was the smallest opportunity, but to her it felt like the world. Learning humility. First, the work was hard. Her arms ached from scrubbing floors, her back bent from carrying sacks of flour. Her fine clothes were gone, replaced by a simple apron smeared with dough. Yet Alina never complained. In fact, she welcomed the pain, for it reminded her that she was earning her bread honestly. The baker's wife noticed her sincerity. "You work like someone who has known hunger," she said kindly. Alina lowered her gaze. "I have, and I will never forget it." Soon, the townsfolk began to notice the change in her. Where once she had walked with her chin high, ignoring or mocking others, she now greeted everyone with a smile. If a beggar passed by the bakery, Alina would slip a small piece of bread into his hands. If an elderly woman struggled with her basket, Alina would run to help. Some people whispered, "Can this truly be the same Alina who mocked the poor?" Others, seeing her sincerity, began to respect her in ways they never had when she was rich. Helping the beggar. Despite her hard work, Alina never forgot the old beggar who had forgiven her. Every evening, after her shift at the bakery, she would set aside a loaf of bread and walk to the riverside. There she would find him, sitting in his familiar place, blessing those who passed. "Here," she would say gently, handing him the bread, "you fed my soul with forgiveness. Let me at least feed your body." The beggar would smile, his wrinkled face glowing with warmth. "You honor me, child, not with bread, but with the kindness you now carry." Their bond grew deep like that of a father and daughter. In his presence, Alina found peace, and in hers, the beggar found comfort. She listened to his wisdom, and he encouraged her journey toward a new life. Gaining true respect. Months passed. Alina's reputation in the town transformed. No longer was she known as the spoiled daughter of a rich merchant. She became known as the girl with a kind heart. People admired her not for jewels or silks, but for her humility. Children ran to greet her when she walked by, shopkeepers smiled at her, and the poor knew they could count on her compassion. One afternoon, a wealthy merchant's wife entered the bakery. Watching Alina serve customers with patience and care, she remarked, "You have a noble spirit. It shines brighter than gold." Alina bowed her head humbly. "Once I thought wealth made me noble. Now I know. It is kindness that gives a person worth." A life rebuilt. In time, the baker and his wife entrusted her with more responsibility. She began learning to knead dough, bake bread, and manage sales. With every loaf she pulled from the oven, she felt a sense of purpose. She was no longer the girl who lived off the riches of others. She was someone who created, who contributed, who gave. Though she never regained the mansion, the jewels, or the wealth she once had, Alina no longer desired them. She had something far more precious: dignity, earned through humility, and a heart rich in compassion. At night, as she lay on her modest bed in a small room above the bakery, she would whisper a prayer of gratitude, not for riches, but for forgiveness, second chances, and the strength to live differently. The true wealth. One evening, sitting beside the beggar as the river reflected the setting sun, Alina asked him, "Do you think I have repaid the wrong I did to you?" The beggar shook his head gently. "Child, you cannot repay the past. What is done is done. But you have turned your cruelty into compassion, your pride into humility. That is the true repayment." Alina smiled, her heart light. "Then perhaps I am richer now than I ever was before." The beggar chuckled softly. "Yes, richer in the only wealth that never fades, the wealth of kindness." And as the river flowed endlessly before them, carrying away the shadows of her past, Alina finally felt at peace.